The moment I heard the splash, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't the soft, familiar ripple of water from my usual afternoon swim. It was loud, chaotic, and unmistakably disrespectful. I rushed to the window, and my stomach dropped. HOA Karen, queen of entitlement, self-appointed neighborhood monarch, and professional boundary ignorer, was once again in my private pool. But this time, she had brought guests. 3 women I had never seen before lounged on my patio chairs, sipping iced drinks, snapping photos, and acting like they had paid admission to a luxury resort. Meanwhile, Karen floated proudly on an inflatable flamingo, waving at me with the smug confidence of someone who believed rules existed for everyone except her. I stepped outside, trying to keep my frustration from boiling over. "Karen," I said sharply, "what are you doing in my pool again?" She lifted her sunglasses and smiled like she was doing me a favor. "Relax," she said. "You're hardly ever out here anyway. And my friends really needed a place to cool off. That's what neighbors are for, right?" Neighbors. She wasn't my neighbor, she was my problem. For weeks, she had been pushing her luck. First it was just a quick dip because her AC failed. Then it was just a few minutes because she needed to unwind. Every time I confronted her, she pretended not to understand what the issue was. But today was different. Today, she had turned my private property into her personal event venue. One of her friends even asked me, "Oh, do you live here?" as if I was the intruder. That was the moment something in me snapped. Karen truly believed that because she was on the HOA board, she could take whatever she wanted. She believed I would never push back. She believed I was too nice, too patient, too accommodating to stop her. She was wrong. I took a deep breath and walked back inside, not because I was giving up but because I had made a decision, one I should have made weeks ago. If Karen wanted to treat my pool like a public amenity, then she was about to learn what happens when you take advantage of the wrong homeowner. I needed proof, evidence of how far Karen had crossed the line. I filmed everything: strangers in my chairs, drinks on my table, and Karen floating like she owned the place. With that recording, she couldn't twist the story or hide behind her title. For the first time, I felt the power shift. I replayed the video 3 times just to make sure I hadn't imagined the whole thing. Every disrespectful detail was there: Karen lounging like a queen, her friends laughing loudly, half-eaten snacks scattered across my patio table, and even one of them adjusting my pool umbrella without asking. It was perfect evidence, undeniable, unspinnable, and ready to use. Still, as I stood there holding my phone, I realized something important: confronting Karen with the truth wouldn't be enough. She'd just twist the narrative, claim I was overreacting, or accuse me of being unneighborly, her favorite passive-aggressive insult. If I wanted this to stop, I needed a bigger plan. But before I could finalize anything, the situation escalated in a way I didn't expect. 5 minutes after I started recording, one of Karen's friends walked into my house. Not knocked. Not asked. Just opened the sliding door and strolled inside as if my property were some kind of open house tour. I rushed toward her. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" She blinked at me, completely unfazed. "Karen said we could use the bathroom. She told us you're cool with it." Cool with it? I was about as cool as a tea kettle about to explode. I pointed her back toward the door. "No. Out. Now." She huffed the way a teenager does when grounded, but she left. And that moment sealed it: Karen wasn't just using my pool. She was inviting people into my home. Into my space. That wasn't entitlement, it was trespassing. I stepped back outside, filming again. Karen looked at me lazily. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. We'll be gone soon." Not soon enough, I thought. When they finally gathered their towels and sauntered out the gate, leaving water puddles and snack wrappers behind, I already knew what I had to do. I cleaned up their mess in silence, every empty cup fueling the fire in my chest. I wasn't the type to scream or make a scene. But when I decided to take action, I didn't hesitate. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began drafting a formal complaint to the HOA, complete with timestamps, video clips, and a detailed list of every boundary she had bulldozed. The best part? Karen had no idea what was coming. She thought her position on the HOA board made her untouchable. She assumed, like always, that rules were flexible for her. But this time, she had gone too far. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was ready. And the plan forming in my mind was going to change everything. The HOA board met once a month in the community clubhouse, a beige room with plastic chairs and the faint smell of stale coffee. Normally, only a handful of residents bothered to show up. But tonight, I arrived early, armed with a flash drive full of video evidence and a determination I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just there to complain. I was there to make sure Karen finally faced consequences for everything she had done. When Karen walked in, her confidence radiated across the room like perfume, strong, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. She carried a clipboard, smiled at everyone like she was their favorite neighbor, and sat in the chair reserved for board members. The moment she saw me in the front row, her smile twitched. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said lightly. "Oh, I'm full of surprises," I replied. As the meeting began, Karen breezed through routine agenda items, landscaping updates, budget allocations, parking issues. But when the floor opened for resident concerns, I stood up before she could redirect the discussion. "I have a serious matter to address," I said, projecting my voice clearly. Karen cleared her throat. "If this is about pool rules, It's about trespassing," I cut in. The room shifted. People stopped fiddling with pens and phones. The quiet buzz of side conversations died instantly. I plugged in my flash drive and projected the video onto the wall screen. The footage spoke for itself: Karen lounging in my pool, her friends wandering across my property, one even walking into my house. Gasps rippled across the room. Someone whispered, "Is that her friend using his patio umbrella like she bought it?" Karen stiffened. "This is being taken out of context," she said quickly. "I was just inviting people into my home." I asked. "Using my property without permission? Ignoring every warning I gave you?" She opened her mouth, closed it, and then tried again. I thought you were fine with it." "No," I said. "You hoped I wouldn't do anything." The HOA president, Mr. Delgado, a calm, reasonable man with a stern brow, adjusted his glasses. "Karen, this is a serious violation. Board members must uphold community rules, not break them." Karen flinched. "I didn't break anything." "He's exaggerating." I was supervising the pool area." "Of your own home," someone muttered sarcastically. Another resident stood. "Karen, you told me last week that homeowners could share amenities if they wanted. You made it sound like a rule." The room wasn't on her side. For the first time, Karen looked genuinely shaken. Mr. Delgado sighed. "We'll discuss disciplinary action. But Karen, until further notice, you are suspended from all HOA authority." Her jaw dropped. Mine finally relaxed. This was only the beginning. The fallout from the HOA meeting should have ended everything, but Karen wasn't someone who accepted consequences gracefully. The very next morning, I woke to the sound of her arguing loudly on her driveway. At first, I ignored it, assuming she was ranting to one of her friends. But when I stepped outside to grab my mail, she spun around and pointed at me as if I were the one who had ruined her life. "You embarrassed me," she shouted. "In front of everyone." I stayed calm. "You embarrassed yourself." She stepped closer, her voice rising. You didn't have to take it that far. A simple conversation would have worked. But no, you wanted to make a spectacle. A conversation. I said. Karen, I tried that. Repeatedly. She scoffed. Well, congratulations. You've created drama for the whole neighborhood. Hope you're proud. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She stormed back into her house, slamming her door so hard it rattled my front window. I thought that would be the end of it, at least for a while. But later that evening, things became stranger. Around 7 p.m., I noticed movement near my backyard. At first, I thought it was just a stray cat, but then I saw a silhouette lurking near the fence. Someone was clearly trying to peer into my yard. When I stepped onto the patio, the figure bolted. I caught only a glimpse, but it was enough. Karen's bright floral cardigan gave her away instantly. She had come back to check whether I was guarding the pool. The next day, she tried a new tactic. Instead of sneaking around, she acted overly friendly. She waved dramatically every time she saw me. She brought over cookies store-bought, barely disguised as homemade. She even left a note on my door that read, "We should talk. I want to clear the air." But I wasn't falling for it. Karen didn't want peace. She wanted leverage. She wanted me to drop the HOA complaint so she could climb back onto the board and regain her imagined throne. That's when I realized something crucial. Karen acted bold because she believed she knew my limits. She thought I wouldn't tighten security. She thought I wouldn't escalate. She thought I wouldn't fight back harder. She was wrong again. So that night, I began upgrading everything around the pool area: new locks, motion lights, reinforced gate hinges. If Karen wanted access, it was about to become impossible. And this was only step one of my plan. Little did she know, the next upgrade I planned would expose her boldest move yet and finally give me the upper hand completely. By the next morning, my backyard looked different: quiet, tightened, and unmistakably protected. The new motion lights sat along the fence like silent guardians, clicking on with a soft hum whenever a leaf shifted. The reinforced locks held steady on the gate, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of control returning to my home. But the most important upgrade wasn't visible unless you knew where to look: the small, discreet security cameras tucked beneath the roofline and nestled behind the hedges. They captured everything without drawing the slightest attention. And I needed them, because deep down I knew Karen wasn't finished causing trouble. Losing her HOA authority had bruised her ego, and bruised egos rarely retreat quietly. I expected attitude, maybe a dramatic confrontation or another passive-aggressive note taped to my door. What I didn't expect was how quickly she escalated. 2 nights after I installed the cameras, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Half asleep, I tapped the notification, expecting raccoons or maybe the neighbor's dog. Instead, the image of Karen, dressed in dark clothing and creeping toward my gate, filled the screen. She moved slowly, glancing over her shoulder with the paranoia of someone who absolutely knew they were doing something wrong. When she reached the gate, she tugged at the handle, muttered something I couldn't hear, and then pulled a small metal tool from her pocket. My jaw clenched as I watched her attempt to pick the lock: deliberate, practiced, and disturbingly casual. She struggled, growing frustrated, then finally gave up and stormed back across the lawn. But the damage was done. Karen wasn't just entitled anymore. She had crossed into criminal territory, and now I had undeniable proof. I wanted to call the police right then, but something held me back. It wasn't fear or doubt, it was strategy. Karen was slippery, always ready with an excuse, always prepared to twist a situation until she looked like the victim. If I confronted her now, she would claim she had been checking the gate for safety or accuse me of fabricating the footage. But if she made one more mistake, one more undeniable attempt to breach my property, then every lie would collapse. So I waited, watching, gathering patience like ammunition. The next night, just after 11, the cameras lit up again. Karen returned, this time holding a bright pink pool float under her arm as if she were heading to a midnight pool party she fully expected to enjoy. She checked the fence, checked the gate, and then positioned the float like she intended to climb over. That was it, the moment I needed. With undeniable proof of her intentions, my plan could finally move from preparation to action. Everything was finally set now. When Karen returned that night with the pool float tucked under her arm, I knew the moment had arrived. Her confidence was almost surreal. She moved with the relaxed boldness of someone who believed they were invincible, someone convinced that consequences were for other people. She paced along the fence line, checking for weak spots, mumbling to herself as though rehearsing excuses. I watched through the camera feed, calm and steady, knowing everything she did was being recorded from 3 separate angles. For the first time since all this began, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't angry. I was ready. She propped the pool float against the fence and tested its sturdiness like she'd done this 100 times. The float slid, wobbling under her weight as she climbed onto it. She grabbed the top of the fence but hesitated. The new motion lights clicked on with a bright burst, flooding her in white light like a spotlight on a stage. She froze, startled, and for a moment I thought she might run home. But the entitlement in her outweighed the fear. She steadied herself and tried again. That was when I stepped outside. The patio door slid open with a sharp sound that sliced through the quiet night. Karen flinched and nearly toppled off the float. Her head snapped toward me, wide-eyed, caught between guilt and rage. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my tone calm but unmistakably firm. She scrambled to keep her balance, waving a hand as if to swat away the truth caught on camera. I wasn't breaking in," she insisted. "I was just checking the fence. Your lights came on and I thought maybe something was wrong." "Really?" I said. "With a pool float? At 11 at night?" She froze again, stunned into silence she couldn't wriggle out of. I held up my phone, the live camera feed glowing on the screen. She saw herself caught red-handed, climbing into my yard with the intent she could no longer deny. Her face drained of color as the reality sank in. "You've been recorded every step of the way," I said. "2 nights in a row. Attempted break-ins. Trespassing. Lock tampering. You've left me no choice." Karen clutched the fence, her voice trembling. "Wait, don't call the police. We can talk." "I didn't mean." I raised a hand. "You meant exactly what you were doing." She opened her mouth again, but I'd already pulled up the non-emergency dispatch number. Her eyes widened as panic replaced arrogance. For the first time since this started, she understood the situation wasn't hers to control anymore. She was caught. Fully, undeniably caught. And this time, she wasn't walking away with a warning. Karen stood frozen beside the fence, clutching the pool float like a shield as I dialed the non-emergency police line. The panic in her eyes said everything. Her confidence was gone, replaced by a silent, rising fear she couldn't hide. I didn't shout, didn't rush, didn't threaten. I simply told the dispatcher the truth. A neighbor had attempted to enter my private property 2 nights in a row and was currently trying to climb over the fence. They said an officer would arrive shortly. Karen finally found her voice. "Please," she whispered, stepping off the float, almost tripping in her hurry. "Let's just forget this happened." I was stressed. The HOA thing ruined my week. I only wanted a quick swim to relax. I stared at her. "You tried to pick my lock." She rubbed her hands together anxiously. I didn't mean harm. I was just desperate." Desperate. That was the excuse she landed on. For a moment we stood in strained silence, broken only by the distant hum of a late-night car. Then headlights appeared at the end of the street. Karen's shoulders tensed when the patrol car slowed in front of my house. The officer, a calm, serious woman, stepped out and approached us with professional precision. "Evening," she said. "We received a report of attempted trespassing." I gestured toward Karen. "Yes, ma'am. I have full video footage." Karen jumped in. "It's a misunderstanding. I wasn't breaking in. I was checking the fence because his lights came on. I got startled, that's all." The officer held up a hand. "Let's hear one person at a time." She looked at me first. I explained everything from Karen using my pool without permission, to inviting strangers onto my property, to the midnight lock-picking attempts. Then I handed her my phone. She watched the videos carefully, lips tightening into a firm line. When she finally turned back to Karen, her tone had changed. "Ma'am, this is clearly trespassing. You attempted to climb the fence. You attempted to manipulate the lock. This isn't something we can dismiss." Karen's face crumpled. "Please. I'm on the HOA board." "Well, I was. I've had a rough week. I wasn't thinking straight." "That doesn't excuse unlawful behavior," the officer replied. "You're lucky the homeowner called us instead of taking more direct action." Karen clasped her hands in front of her face, desperate now. "I'll stop. I swear. I won't go near his house again." The officer looked at me. "Do you want to press charges?" The moment felt heavy. Karen's eyes filled with dread. She waited, trembling, for my answer. I took a breath. "Not yet." Relief washed over her like a wave, but she didn't realize that this wasn't mercy. It was leverage. And she wasn't out of danger yet. Karen thought she had narrowly escaped punishment when I chose not to press charges. Relief washed over her face, fleeting and desperate, but I knew better. This wasn't the end of the story, it was the moment to ensure she truly understood the consequences of her actions. If she ever thought about treating someone else's property as her personal playground, she would remember this night for the rest of her life. Over the next few days, I reinforced every boundary I could. Motion lights flashed along the fence at all angles, locks were double-checked, and cameras covered every inch of the yard. It wasn't just security, it was a statement. Every time Karen approached the property, she would see the reminders of the night she had overstepped. But that alone wasn't enough. I wanted the lesson to hit harder, psychologically, socially, and permanently. The HOA board meeting the following week gave me the perfect opportunity. Karen showed up, still nursing the bruised ego that had begun the cycle. She tried her usual act of charm and subtle manipulation, but I had prepared carefully. I shared the video evidence with the entire board, outlining every single violation: trespassing, lock tampering, unauthorized guests, and repeated disregard for property boundaries. I didn't embellish, I simply presented the facts. Her attempts to explain or excuse herself were met with firm, silent disapproval. By the end of the meeting, the board had voted unanimously: Karen was permanently removed from all HOA authority, suspended from attending meetings without prior approval, and required to submit a formal apology to the neighborhood for her behavior. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was a full-scale public accountability she couldn't spin or hide from. And the best part? The neighborhood finally knew the truth about her antics, and I could walk past her house without the gnawing frustration of unanswered disrespect. But I didn't stop there. Every time I looked out my window at the pool, I made small but deliberate reminders of the lesson she had learned: clean chairs, pristine towels, locked gates, and the occasional flash of a camera lens catching the light. Each detail was a subtle reinforcement that my home, my rules, and my boundaries were not negotiable. Karen could never forget the power shift. She thought she could bend the rules, now she knew they were ironclad. In the end, it wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. She had assumed entitlement would win. She had underestimated me. And in learning that the consequences of overstepping are real, permanent, and undeniable, she finally grasped what I had known all along: Some lines, once crossed, leave marks that can never be erased. And the lesson? She'll carry it forever. With Karen permanently removed from HOA authority and the neighborhood aware of her actions, a strange sense of calm settled over the community. For the first time in months, I could enjoy my backyard without anxiety, without constantly checking for trespassers, without the lingering tension that had followed every encounter. My pool was mine again, truly mine, and the lessons Karen had learned ensured it would stay that way. The peace wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and deeply satisfying. The first morning I stepped outside, the sunlight glinting off the water, I noticed small signs of the restored order. Chairs neatly aligned, towels folded on their hooks, and not a single sign of intrusion. Even the neighbors seemed different. There were nods of acknowledgement instead of whispers behind fences, and polite waves rather than awkward sideways glances. Karen's influence, once a heavy cloud over the community, had lifted. People were freer, happier, and most importantly, respectful of boundaries. It was a victory for more than just me, it was a victory for the entire neighborhood. Karen, of course, didn't vanish entirely. I still saw her occasionally across the street, pacing her driveway or checking her mail with a carefully measured glance toward my property. But the difference now was glaring. Her confidence had been replaced by caution, her arrogance by apprehension. Every time she looked my way, I could see the memory of that night etched in her expression the moment she realized that entitlement had limits, and crossing those limits had consequences. She had learned that my patience, though extensive, was not infinite. And she would never forget it. In the following weeks, I took time to reinforce the security measures that had kept her at bay. Cameras remained active, locks were checked regularly, and motion lights continued their silent vigil. It wasn't paranoia, it was a commitment to preserving the peace that had been so hard won. I also shared lessons with friends and neighbors about setting boundaries, documenting incidents, and standing firm when others attempt to overstep. Knowledge, after all, is the most effective defense against repeat offenders. And now, with Karen finally held accountable, I could focus on enjoying my life without the constant stress that had plagued me. Sitting by the pool one warm afternoon, I reflected on the journey. It had been exhausting, frustrating, and at times infuriating. But it had also been empowering. I had faced entitlement, invasion, and audacity, and I had come out not only unscathed but stronger. Karen had assumed she could control me, my space, and my peace of mind. She had been wrong. And in teaching her a lesson she would never forget, I had reclaimed not just my property, but my sense of safety and respect. The pool sparkled under the sun, a quiet testament to boundaries upheld and patience rewarded. And for the first time in a long time, I could relax, knowing that my home was finally and completely my own.